All right, good evening, everybody. What's up? How y'all feeling? All right. I'm pretty sure everyone can notice Pastor Mark and Pastor James are not here this week, so you're stuck with the B team. But yeah, B team. But seriously, projector is down, so it feels a little weird. It feels like, the rookies, when they finally make it to the NFL or the NBA, and all of the veterans, they play like the neat little tricks. They might wrap your car in saran wrap. I'm not saying that this is the acts of Mark and James, but it feels like it. But anyway, guys, welcome to Redemption Heights. Thank you for joining us. And it's a pleasure to be here to be able to preach tonight. If I'm not mistaken, my first opportunity was last summer, and boy, was it a good old memory. So, thinking about my childhood, it brings back many, many memories, but one of the most vivid ones comes from my own experience as a parent. And I remember the first time, I bought Leah a bicycle. I put it together, I was excited, and Leah would be so happy to ride around in the house, but I took her outside, and it was a difference in her response of how she would trust. Now, as long as I was holding on to the back of the bicycle, everything was good. She would pedal faster and everything, but the moment I would let go, you seen a change in her. It's like, hold on, I need you. So it showed the difference of her perspective, especially as a child. So, I would reassure her that, I'm not going anywhere. And occasionally I would try to move my hand and see if she could do it on her own. But eventually she built up enough courage and confidence. But the thing I was thinking about was, imagine if she had stayed cautious forever, never wanting to let go of my hand, or worse, if she had laughed at the idea of ever riding without training wheels. She would have missed out on the joy and freedom of riding alone. See, our faith journey can be a lot like that. Sometimes we have that confident faith that propels us forward. Other times we're cautious and hesitant. And unfortunately, there are times we might even be critical and doubting. But when we embrace confident faith, it's like riding a bike for the first time, experiencing the joy and the freedom that comes from trusting Jesus. So here's my point for tonight, which I want you to understand from this passage. Trust in Jesus' power to bring miraculous change, even when it seems impossible. Jesus calls us to step in faith, even when we're not sure what's ahead. So tonight we'll be continuing what Pastor Mark and Pastor James has been going on for about the last month. We'll be in Luke chapter 8, verses 40 to 56. So in Luke 8, 40 to 56, we encounter these three different responses to Jesus' power. The confident faith of a woman who reaches out for healing, the cautious faith of Jairus seeking help for his daughter, and the critical faith of those who doubted Jesus' ability to perform miracles. Each response teaches us about the power of belief and the miraculous change it can bring into our lives and our community. Let us explore these verses and discover how trusting in Jesus' power can bring miraculous change, even when it seems impossible. The power of belief, this potential for miraculous change, should fill us with hope and encouragement. So I'm going to read the verses and then I'll pray. Now, when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue. And falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter about 12 years of age, and she was dying. As Jesus went, the people pressed around him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And though she had spent all her living on physicians, she cannot be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, Who was it that touched me? When all denied it, Peter said, Master, the crowd surround you and are pressing in on you. But Jesus said, someone touched me, for I perceive that the power has gone out from me. And when a woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. So that was amazing right there. So here we go. Last week, Pastor Mark kind of described this section in Luke 8 as, the Jesus tour. We started off with a couple parables, and then Jesus goes on to some miracles where we see him, stop and use his authority for the weather. And last week, we see Jesus' authority against demons. So this is where we continue that story. And today, we see Jesus returning to familiar grounds. As we set the scene, Jesus has just returned from the region of Gerasenes, where he demonstrated his authority, and now he's back amongst the crowds, and the people eagerly await him. Now, can you imagine if TMZ existed back then? They followed Jesus around reporting breaking news. Jesus of Nazareth is spotted. You could just see it, the crowds in the background going wild. And here amongst this crowd, a man named Jairus is introduced. The text tells us that he is the ruler of a synagogue, a position of great respect and authority. Yet, despite his status, we see something remarkable. Jairus falls at the feet of Jesus, a humble and a desperate act, imploring him to come to his house. His only daughter, about 12 years old, is dying. This desperation and faith sets the stage for the following incredible events. But just as Jesus starts to follow Jairus, we see the narrative suddenly turn. You see the crowd is pressing on Jesus from all sides, and amid this chaos, a woman emerges. Her story is one of pain and desperation, having suffered from a debilitating condition for 12 long years. Yet her confident faith leads her to take a bold step. She believes she will be healed if she can just touch the fringe of Jesus. This leads to my first point for the night, and I consider it bold faith. Despite years of being marginalized, isolated, and looked at with a side eye, faith drove her action. You see this action driven by faith. You see, bold faith is not passive. It is an active force that drives us to take bold steps, even in the fear and uncertainty. It is the kind of faith that pushes us beyond our comfort zones and compels us to act when it would be easier to stay still. You see, confident faith believes in possibilities beyond our immediate reality, seeing potential where others see obstacles. It is a determination to move forward even when the path isn't clear, and a courage to reach out even when the outcome is uncertain. I once read a story about this small town experiencing a severe drought, and the local church decided to hold a prayer meeting to ask for rain. The whole town gathered at the church, and the pastor stood before the congregation and said, "We are here to pray for rain." But before we began, the pastor said, "I have a question. How many of you brought an umbrella?" The congregation looked around, realizing no one had brought an umbrella. And the pastor continued, "We say we have faith in God, that he will send rain, but our actions show otherwise. True faith would have been prepared. As Oswald Chambers once said, faith never knows where it is being led, but it loves, and it knows the one it is leading." This faith is grounded in a deep sense of trust and conviction. It is like a seed planted in fertile soil, growing and pushing through the ground to reach the sunlight. It thrives on hope and refuses to be deterred by setbacks or delays. Confident faith stands firm in the belief that what is hoped for will come and pass, and it takes tangible steps towards that vision. It's a faith that doesn't just wait for change to happen, but actively seeks it out, believing that the effort will be met with fulfillment. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper into the story. We've seen a woman's confidence led her to take this bold action, but let's understand her condition and what makes her faith so remarkable. You see, despite her fear and shame, she acted. She didn't let the crowd or the condition stop her. You know, one of my, I'm sure everybody's caught up with current events right now, but I've been keeping up with the Olympics, and something dawned on me. I seen nothing about the Paralympics yet, so I had to go back and check the date of when they would start. And the beautiful thing about that is, you know, you have a lot of handicapped people, a lot of people with certain circumstances, and they just keep going. Like, it's something deeper inside them, despite their situation, that drives and propels them forward. This is a little bit different, though. Our faith is rooted in Jesus. So it's not based on our own will, it's based on the truth about who Jesus is. So imagine this 12-year-old, 12 years of suffering from a condition that makes this woman ceremonially unclean according to Levitical law. This meant she was an outcast, she was marginalized from society and unable to participate in religious activities. Her condition caused both physical pain, social isolation, and poverty. She spent the majority of her money on physicians, Yet despite this suffering, she demonstrates a faith deeply rooted in a belief that change is possible. This is confident faith, faith that acts despite circumstances. You know, she strongly believed, if I just touch his garment, if she could just get close enough, I will be healed. So she touched his garment and was healed. Her determination to reach out despite the risk of making others unclean or facing further rejection shows what it means to have bold faith. Now let's think about what happened next. She touched Jesus and her faith drew power from him, healing her immediately. It wasn't just a physical healing, it was a complete restoration. She went from being an outcast to being whole again. You know, think about the Levitical law. When a person is considered unclean and you touch someone else, they would be considered unclean as well. But this is quite different. We see right here that the power of Jesus, by touching the power of Jesus, does not make him unclean, but in return, it makes you clean and it restores you. That is the transformative power of faith. So let's look at verses 45 and 46, where Jesus says, "Who touched me? And then I perceive that the power is gone out from me." Jesus isn't losing power like a battery running low. I was thinking earlier, like when you charge your cell phone, the adapter, the charger does not lose power. Like when you don't charge your phone, your power starts to deplete. And the only way of life or restoring that energy is being connected to the true source. See, what Jesus is doing is highlighting the unique nature of her touch. Her touch was different in a crowd of people pressing against him. It was an act of faith. Jesus distinguishes between the casual contact of the crowd in a deliberate faith filled with touch of someone seeking healing. By saying that power had gone out from him, Jesus emphasizes that the real tangible impact of faith, her belief in his power to heal, was so strong that it drew on his divine authority and it brought about her healing. You know what amazes me the most is Jesus' response. Instead of condemning her amidst this large crowd, he says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." What kind of faith draws power from God? Confident, believing faith that takes bold actions, trusting in Jesus' promises despite uncertainty. Jesus was ready to respond to her outstretched hand of faith, and her faith brought about healing. God is always ready to honor those who come to him, true with believing faith. But story does not end there. While this miracle is unfolding, there is another story of faith developing. Imagine Jairus standing there witnessing this miraculous healing of Jesus. His desperation is growing. You know, the question that many of us have is Jesus too busy for us? You see, with Jairus, when he was falling at the feet of Jesus, Jesus got up and was ready to follow Jairus to his house, but it was interrupted. His daughter is getting ready to die, and Jairus sits here while Jesus heals this woman. Is Jesus too busy for us? We often want Jesus to address our problems immediately. And when he doesn't respond in our time, we tend to waver. You know, I love the song Come Thou Fount. And it talks about that, you know, we're prone to wander. And that kind of like brings me to my second point, is this illustration of a wavering faith. So let's go back to the beginning of the passage. If we think about verses 40 to 42, Jairus, a synagogue leader, comes to Jesus and falls at his feet, pleading for him to go into his house because his only daughter is dying. Despite his high position and potential for public scrutiny, Jairus' desperation drives him to seek Jesus out. You know, this shows the initial spark of faith. He believed Jesus could heal his daughter. And just imagine Jairus, you know, anxious, fearful with every passing second. He's thinking, come on, Jesus, we need to hurry. And if we look at verses 49 and 50, it says, while he was still speaking, someone from the ruler's house came and said, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore." But Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, "Do not fear, only believe, and she will be well." You know, this is the moment where Jairus' faith is tested. He had hoped Jesus could heal his daughter, and now someone arrives from Jairus' home with this devastating news. Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore. And after reading that, you know, I had to ask myself, is Jesus ever troubled by our problems? Absolutely not. Jesus invites us to bring our burdens to him, saying, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Is Jesus less faithful because he did not act with urgency? No. Jesus' timing is perfect. The Lord is not slow to fulfill his promises, as he counts slowness, but the Lord is patient towards you. Does Jesus' timing reflect a lack of care or concern? Not at all. Jesus delayed visiting Lazarus because Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. His delay wasn't due to a lack of care, but to reveal a greater purpose and glory for God. You see, Jesus' words here reveal his deep understanding of our human condition. He knows that even when we have faith, it can be challenged by our circumstances. You see, Jairus wasn't necessarily wavering in his faith, but Jesus recognized the natural human response to fear and to doubt when hope seems lost. Jesus offers reassurance and calls for continued faith, that our trust in him should persist even in the most hopeless situations. You see, when we think about fear, it focuses on the obstacles and the potential for negative outcomes, whereas faith looks beyond the present circumstance to the possibilities that lie in God's power and promises. By telling Jairus to not fear but to believe, Jesus is teaching us that faith requires us to trust in him, even when the situation seems hopeless. Those who have wavering faith are hesitant to believe in God, and when confronted with tragedy, they quickly return to what they believed before. And next we see how Jesus encourages to trust in him, and his command to only believe isn't about ignoring our problems or pretending they don't exist. We need to acknowledge that fear and doubt are natural human reactions. It's natural. It's about shifting our focus from our fears to his power. Faith isn't the absence of doubt, but the willingness to trust Jesus despite our doubts and fears. It's about believing in his ability to bring healing, restoration, and peace. So let me ask you, are you struggling with addiction and wondering if you'll ever find freedom? Are you in a broken relationship, doubting if there's any hope for reconciliation? Is financial stress overwhelming you, making you question if you'll ever find stability? Are health issues causing you to fear for your future and doubt God's healing power? Remember Jesus' words in these moments. Do not fear, only believe. Trust that he is with you, that he sees your struggles, and that his power is greater than any obstacle you face. Think about the specific areas in your life where fear and doubt are holding you back. And what would it look like to replace that fear with faith? So moving on to the final part of the story, I call this section critical faith. I love critics at sometimes, whether they're right or wrong. So I'm gonna read these verses right here and then we'll continue. And when he came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the father and mother of the child. And all were weeping and mourning for her. But he said, do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. By taking her by the hand, he called, saying, child, arise. And her spirit returned, and she got up at once. And he directed that something should be given her to eat. And her parents were amazed, but he charged them to tell no one what had happened. You know, it's like trying to get into an exclusive club. Imagine Jesus as the bouncer at the door with a clipboard saying, all right, Peter, John, James, you're on the list. Mom, Dad, you're in too. The rest of you, sorry, not tonight. Jesus knew he needed to create this righteous atmosphere for a miracle. So he gave the VIP access to those with faith and left the skeptics outside. So let us talk about skepticism. For a moment in our story, the mourners laughed at Jesus when he said the girl was only sleeping. And how they criticized and scoffed and laughed at him, it was directly aimed at him, doubting his power and words. It's like they were saying, come on, Jesus, we know she's dead. Who are you kidding? But here's the thing, when we don't believe and we're skeptical, it can blind us to the miracles right before us. When we doubt Jesus, we question his ability to work in our lives. This part of the story shows us that being doubtful doesn't deter Jesus. He knows our human tendency to doubt. Yet he still invites us to believe. Jesus took that moment to demonstrate his ultimate authority, showing not that he just has power over sickness, but he has the power over life and death. When I was in the first grade, I think it was the end of the school year. So we went to summer camp, and I was a very, very naughty little kid, I would say. And I was cutting up at summer camp, and the teacher just had it. She was fed up, and she said, "Vargas, go stand in the corner, close your eyes." So I went in the corner, I closed my eyes, and about 10 minutes later, the teacher tells me, "Hey, DeVargas, your mom is here to pick you up." And that was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I never go home early, so I just keep my head in this corner, and I close my eyes. So 20 minutes go by, she's still, "DeVargas, come on, your mom is," so she just had it. You know what? Your mom is leaving. I didn't hear my mom, I didn't hear nobody, I just heard snickering from the rest of the kids at camp. And long story short, once I was able to go back to my seat, everyone was laughing at me "Nah, man, you could have went home." And I'm like, my mom wasn't here. So it's hours later, and it's time for me to go home, and I see my mom and my sister. And my sister has bags full of candy, new clothes, everything. And I'm like, "What's this?" So my mom is like, "I came to your school to pick you up. I seen you standing in the corner, and you missed out." I wasn't able to believe or trust that my mom was there. Now, I was in trouble, so I don't know if I wanted to turn around anyway. It would have been worse. But just in that moment in life where we're skeptical, we don't believe the possibility of these things that are able to happen. So now let us focus on those whom Jesus excluded from witnessing this miracle. You see, Jesus only allowed Peter, John, James, and the parents to go inside with him. The rest, those who laughed and scoffed, were left outside. This reminds me of a deeper truth. Those who mock and criticize King Jesus, those who doubt his authority and reject his message, are like those excluded from his kingdom. You see, they're missing out on Jesus' life-changing power. In a broader sense, this foreshadows what is to come. Just as those scoffers were not permitted to witness the resurrection of Jairus' daughter, those who reject Jesus will not inherit his kingdom. It is a sobering reminder that our response, how Jesus responds. We've seen Jesus' authority over weather when he calmed the storm, over demons when he cast them out, and now over sickness and death. Seriously, how good is our God? So my last few questions are there areas in your life where you're skeptical of Jesus' power? Do you find yourself doubting his ability to change your situation? Are you willing to move from skepticism to faith? And for some, are you ready to stop mocking and start believing in Jesus' power. You see, these are common struggles that we all face. Moving from skepticism to faith requires us to acknowledge our doubts and fears honestly, but also remember the countless example of Jesus' miraculous power and his faith throughout Scripture and in our own lives. Are you willing to take that step of faith, trusting that Jesus is capable of bringing miraculous change? Let us not be like those who were left outside. Let us be a part of the miracle, witnessing and experiencing God's power in our lives. So, what is the point? My message today is simple. Trust in Jesus' power to bring miraculous change, even when it seems impossible. So for my fellow believers, what that looks like is you see, just as Peter, John, and James witnessed Jesus' miraculous power, despite the crowd's initial beliefs, we too should trust Jesus' ability to bring about miraculous change in our lives. Remember that God has authority over everything, even when circumstances seem dire. And for the non-believer, I just ask that you place your faith in Jesus, because what's going to happen is you'll be just like the scoffers that laugh right here and find yourself on the outside of God's kingdom.